My name's Eva Echo. My pronouns are she, they. I'm an activist, writer, speaker. I'm head of communications for and engagement for Birmingham Pride, and I also sit on the Crown Prosecution Service's hate crime panel. Some of you may recognise me from an earlier episode. I'm back to moderate this one. I am, just for accessibility, I'm a trans woman with a long black hair, wearing a pink t-shirt with not a phase written on it, and also have visible tattoos. I'm really, really humbled to be here today as part of this really important Pride Summit, pre-Pride Summit, because I guess it's too easy to overlook the reasons for Pride, and that goes with other queer calendar events as well, especially when we're just getting swept up in the flow of things. But these events happen for a reason, and I'm glad We Create Space has created this summit that allows us a chance to prepare, because we do need to, even though we think it's Pride, it's coming, here we go again, we do need to prepare because we know it's a huge drain on us individuals. So let's look at this as a way to really make use of what's to come. Pride belongs to all of us in the LGBTQ plus community. Let's remember, it's ours to shape. But sometimes external factors can try and take over that space. And I think that's something that we're all acutely aware of. So it's up to us to lead the change and to lead allies to ensure that we don't allow Pride to become taken over or rainbow washed. But something that we may not be aware of is that we could be doing some harm from within as well. We could actually be holding others back. And that's something I want to explore in this particular session. As Maylis mentioned, unfortunately, something came up with Max. So they're unable to join us, but they do send their love. However, I am joined by the wonderful Rico, Tatum, and Yaz. So first of all, let's get to know them a bit better. So let's start with you, Rico.
Yeah, sure. My name is Rico Jacob Chace. My pronouns are he, him for the sake of this conversation. I'm a Black trans guy, director at Transaction UK, CIC, and also a trustee at LG Consortium.
Thank you. Great to share this space with you again, Rico. Tatum, tell us a little about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tatum. My pronouns are they, she, and I'm white. I have long blonde hair. I'm wearing a mint green hoodie, and I've got glasses on, circular glasses. I'm very, I rolled out of bed this morning, not feeling too good, not expecting to come on and speak, but that's definitely an asset to this space, because I thought, on the theme of showing up messy, here I am messy. I hadn't even brushed my teeth. I did it on the lunch break. But thank you for having me. And I'm, did you want to say something?
Oh, after you. I didn't do my audio description. So yeah, afterwards.
Oh, cool. I'm in Somerstown, and I'm a podcast presenter and producer.
Oh, thank you. Rico, do you want to give your...
Yeah, audio. I've got black curly hair, slight facial hair. As a trans guy, I'm very proud about. It's minimal, but makes me very, very happy. And I'm wearing a polo shirt.
Thanks, Rico. And Tatum, thank you again for stepping in at last minute. And over to Yaz.
Unmute cells. Hi, Yaz, pronoun she and her. I am an EDI strategist, consultant, so I own my own consultancy. I'm the director of Confronting Change, EDI strategies. I'm also like a mentor, a speaker, a writer. I do all sorts. Visual description of me: I am a dark-skinned Black woman. I've got close cropped blonde hair at the moment. I'm wearing gold metal frame glasses and a kind of maroon mustard cardigan sort of thing. And I'm in my living room with like patterned wallpaper behind me. I've got ringtail lemurs on the wall, actually. And yeah, I think that's me.
Thanks, Yaz. I am loving that background. It's just amazing. Okay, so as people will know, we're all about creating space, striving for equality and equity. But I guess that's when we realize that there are those within our community who are more marginalized because of intersectional factors. So let's start with this panel with an absolute banger of a question, and that is, how do we create more space in our community for those that are most marginalized? So Rico, do you want to get us started with that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to know when you need to let someone speak for themselves. And I feel as if I always see organizations run by for different minority groups, not run by them. And I feel like there's always a bit kind of missing trick there. I think it's also important to recognize intersectionality. I think we keep talking about intersectionality left, right, and center. It's not sufficient just to have people that you consult. Your organization through and through has to be representative of the community, because the LGBT community is a cross-section of all colors, creeds, protective characteristics. So that's really, really important. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. And it's, yeah, that tick boxing sort of exercise where, I mean, when it comes to like marginalized groups, even things like gender, when we look at who's on the board, it's just, it's too easy for it to be a tick box exercise, and we need to make sure that the people who are needed, there's representation, they're there for the right reasons as well. Tatum, what do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the things about seeing who's in the space, because a lot of the time, for me, I'm disabled, I've got muscular dystrophy, so I sometimes use a wheelchair, sometimes use different aids, and I've been in queer spaces for a long time, but as my disability has developed, it has made me feel that even the queer spaces aren't for me. So I think a lot of the time noticing, even within these spaces that are supposed to be for everyone, for all queers, a lot of the time they're not. So not only looking around at who's in the space, but who's actually on the panels, and how are we actually creating these spaces that it's one thing making them accessible for people to get into, because a lot of the time the buildings themselves, you know, I'm sure you've all experienced that, like upstairs or downstairs. So within that, even getting into the spaces for people who are disabled is really challenging. But then even when people arrive, if there are things put in place, then how do we make sure that disabled people can thrive once they arrive in the space too?
Absolutely. And I think it's, you know, for able-bodied people, it's stuff we take for granted. And I guess we can take a step back and we can look at it and think, well, you know, what would others need? But the most important thing really is just to ask them and give them that space to come forward and say, well, this is what we need as well. Yaz, what do you think? What can we do to create more space?
Yeah, I guess kind of echoing what's been said a little bit, like first and foremost, just having conversations, just like actually listening to people when they are telling you about their stories and their experiences. And obviously that involves actually inviting people into spaces, and so taking a step back and recognizing who isn't present, and actually taking moments to think about and actually to go forth and have these conversations about why people might not be present in the space, what's preventing them from getting there, and what can we do to make sure that we are creating like accessible and inclusive spaces where people can actually access them. And as Tatum was saying, like once people are there, not just like having them in the space for the sake of it, or to fulfill our, like, you know, like tick boxes and things like that, but actually really engaging people in conversations and breaking down what their needs are, and how we can support them to thrive, rather than just like having them present to kind of benefit, especially if we're talking about like a business or an organization, not looking at how they're going to benefit us, but actually how we can support them to like to thrive and be their best selves.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like looking externally as well. As well as just, you know, what we need as well. And the thing is, like, we're all accountable for what we do. Nobody's perfect, and by any stretch of the imagination, nobody claims to be. But I mean, like, as someone so visible, I am very critical of everything that I do. I don't know about you, but I'm always weighing up all my actions, because I'm thinking this could have a ripple effect. Am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? What if somebody thinks this or that? And I guess sometimes I'm too critical, sometimes I'm not critical enough. And it's about finding that balance and being able to hold myself to account, and to be accountable of things that I do, whilst I suppose not letting it consume me. So what sort of practices can we build on to keep ourselves accountable and to find that balance? Rico, any tips on that?
I think it's important to recognize the fact that you're not going to know everything. It's impossible to know everything. Plus, every single human being on this planet has a different lived experience and therefore is formed different views about the way the world is shaped. So it's completely normal and to ask questions. In fact, it's better to ask questions. So I'm privileged in the sense that I have a lot of people around me that I can ask questions when I'm not entirely sure, or I feel as if, is this the right thing to do? Or am I getting the wrong end of the stick? Because we do have a lot of wealth of knowledge. We have elders in our community. We also have a whole raft of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, race, colours, creeds. So it's important to ask people about what their lived experiences are. Accountability. I have friends that don't really have much filters. So if I'm doing something stupid, they'll be like, Rico, no. just simple as no, that's not appropriate behavior. Well, you can't say that. I think it's because I seem to have a lot of friends who are diversity consultants. So yeah, it kind of just comes to this territory. They're quite comfortable telling you no. So yeah, also recognizing your own privilege. Like I'm aware of the fact that colorism, I'm fairer than most of my siblings. So my lived experience is slightly different. Plus I have this cute British accent, so that makes my life slightly different as well. Everyone kind of has their own privilege that you need to be aware of. And privilege isn't always a bad thing if you use it to speak for, advocate for other minority groups. I think that's an important point. Use your privilege. Your privilege is your power, so use it for good.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's great that we have friends that can be those filters for us, especially where we're like right in the middle of it. And it's sometimes really difficult to see, like, is this the right thing? Can I be saying this? Should I do this? And to actually have those friends there who unapologetically would just be like, no. Sometimes, you know, we all need those friends. We all need those filters. Tatum, what about you? What sort of practices do you think we can build on?
Well, I think it has to start from the very beginning, because when I was younger, I did a lot of sort of leadership and youth advisory stuff. And then I'd go onto a board and I'd look around and there'd be, you know, one Black person there that was just the token, or I was the only disabled person there. So it's that thing where it's like, what are we doing from the very beginning to make sure that it's embedded into the programming, into events, into organizations? That's making sure that there's the people in the room, but also, yeah, not just having one person to be the spokesperson for everyone, because when it comes to resilience, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, but that's exhausting to be that resilient all the time, to be the person who's speaking up on behalf of everyone. So I think as well, it's like taking in, it's watching, reading, learning and listening from different identities than ourselves. So a lot of the time, depending on where we're brought up, it's not necessarily always, sometimes it is not necessarily our fault that we haven't met people who are different from us, right? But it is then our responsibility to educate ourselves and to have an understanding. And I think people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing. And there's so many resources out there. So, you know, to really try and educate before you speak, but also there's some things that we learn as we go. And so I've really seen a lot of people being so afraid to say something that they're not learning, and that they're, especially with disabilities, they're so afraid to say something that's problematic, let's say, that then they almost just don't engage with people who are disabled. And then it just drives the community, you know, further and further away from being connected. So I think it's that thing where it's like, don't be afraid to ask questions, but don't just ask, don't just expect someone to be able to answer all of your questions without doing a bit of research first.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Yaz? What sort of practices can we build on to keep ourselves accountable?
I think first and foremost, you've just got to be like open to growth and open to acknowledging and accepting that, like Rico was saying, like we don't have all the answers, we don't know everything. There's going to be a lot of things that we don't know. And so like it's about, I guess, the attitude and the approach that you take before you even start to like engage with this. Is just accepting that you're not going to know everything and that there is a lot to learn from other people. And then for me, I think I encourage a lot of like reflective practice. Both that's something that I engage with personally myself, but also that I encourage like the businesses and organizations that I work with. And a lot of this work is around like looking at what's come before, what has been done previously, and where we've got things wrong or where we've been challenged on things. And again, how we receive that. So I think being really open to like feedback and actively encouraging people to tell us what their experiences have been and where we have got things wrong, and then how can we improve things? How can we address, like I said, some of the barriers that might exist and that might have prevented them from engaging previously. So another part of reflective practice that I think is quite important is again about like decentering yourself and just again accepting that you won't know everything. And that, yes, our own experiences are important. They need to be part of the conversation. But at the end of the day, we can't just view things specifically through our own lens. We have to be open to other people's perceptions and ideas about things. So kind of taking a step back a little bit and taking yourself maybe out of the center of the conversation and creating room for other people to come forward and come into that and learn from their experiences as well. And so about like a lot of what Tatum was saying as well, like this unlearning and like all these previous ideas that have been imposed on us previously, unlearning and decentering ourselves and reflecting on, okay, well, how can we build on this now? How can we start to relearn? Sorry, I've got my dog is being weird down here. Yeah, so how can we like approach things with and take what learning we can from what's been done previously?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a fantastic point. It's that unlearning, isn't it? Like we're all on this learning journey, and there's so much unconscious bias that we're bound to come across something that we get wrong, that we just don't have the ammo or the knowledge about. And it's fair to say that we do what we do because our passion is linked to something that's very unique to us, and that is our own lived experience. It's a source of our knowledge, one that's very, very personal. But that can inadvertently cause us to have like quite a blinkered approach, I think, especially when it comes to sharing communal spaces. I find that listening to others definitely helps me to stay grounded. And sometimes people come to me with stuff. Sometimes I'll go in search of it after hearing what people have talked about. And it really helps me to put things into perspective so that there's no accidental gatekeeping or anything like that within our own community. So how do you all keep yourselves aware of the space that you're taking? Does anyone want to jump in?
I don't mind starting. I was thinking about this earlier because a lot of our earlier conversations were around things like imposter syndrome. And like we've spoken about how as queer people, I think that's something that a lot of us have had to kind of overcome and learn how to take up space. So it's quite interesting getting to a point where we've kind of had to do a lot of unlearning and actually learn to claim space. And then at the same time, especially once you've gotten to a position where you might have a voice and where you might have a platform, to actually then start to reflect on how are you creating space and room for other people within that. And so it's a really interesting kind of dynamic. And I think it's an ongoing thing that, we'll constantly be trying to balance out in our lives. How can we step forward and claim the space that we maybe haven't had before and utilize our own voices, but then how to make room for other people as well. And it kind of similar, it relates to like what we've been saying this whole time, of just like looking around us and seeing whose voices haven't been heard before and how can we elevate them and platform them and making sure that we're bringing people along on our journeys. And yeah, so sometimes I literally will just kind of, if even in a space like this, I know I've just like jumped in and volunteered myself, but usually I actually kind of hold back a little bit because I'm so conscious of, am I speaking more than other people? Am I allowing other people room to contribute? And it's just something that I think actually is naturally embedded in me because as somebody who's been socialized as a woman, that's what I've been taught to do. So it kind of ties into like what I'm saying about like having the confidence to claim my space, but then also having the awareness maybe to recognize that, yeah, maybe my voice isn't always the most important one or the one that needs to be heard in that moment, and who else's voice hasn't been heard, and how can I make room for that?
Yeah, I mean, something that's been touched on throughout the day already is this idea of imposter syndrome. And I think we all see it as a very negative thing, but in some ways it can be quite a good thing as well, because it forces us to take a step back and ask questions of ourselves, including, is this our space? Should we be talking in the space, or should we be handing it over and giving that space and that mic to other people as well? Tatum, what do you think? How do we keep ourselves aware of the space we take?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because it definitely is that balance of when for so long you haven't taken up space, to step into that power and do that, but also know which spaces not to do that, and to give it to other people and take a step back. And so for me, there's been many occasions where I've been hired by an organization, and I mean, for my own reasons of being homeless and needing money, I took jobs. But when I was in a position where I had a bit more of safety, I'm like, okay, I let them know, I won't say the organization, but I was like, I don't think you need another white person for this, you know? So it's just about, where can I be aware and go, oh, actually, there's these people who could do this, and bring other people in and lift up their voices, for sure. And like, for me as well, you know, a lot of my friends would be like, well, come to Pussy Palace with me. And I'm like, no, because that's not a space for me. So it's just like knowing when it's like, I don't want to take up space in there. But then in other places where I'm like, okay, well, I can step into this. And something that's just come up for me as well is like, when we're talking about actual physical space as well, it's really interesting as somebody who is disabled, because people really don't have a lot of awareness of people who are disabled in these spaces. And so, you know, it doesn't really matter if I have a walking stick. You'd be surprised how much it doesn't make a difference, you know, if people actually giving you space to be able to feel safe. So yeah, there's a certain amount where you don't want people to treat you differently and be like, oh, and like sympathy and make a big deal out of it. But also I think people should be aware of like disabled people occupying space, and how to make it feel as like comfortable and safe for them.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's like that whole, you know, just because someone has, you know, a walking stick and you see them using it, you think, okay, disability, but not all disabilities are visible. And like on a space like this, like on an online space like Zoom, you could be, you know, people could have been talking throughout the pandemic to someone who's got a disability, and you'd never know. And without, you know, being there, having that direct interaction, you might miss that. You might miss the opportunity to acknowledge, you know, this person has a disability, and what they do is very valid, and who they are, their existence. So we need to bring them into it as well. So spaces like these are great, because it allows people to step forward and kind of offer their insight as well. Rico, what about you? How do you keep yourself aware of the space that you take up?
To be honest, I'm not even going to profess to be an expert on this. I'm still working it out.
That's what I said earlier. I'm still winging it too.
100% winging it. I really hate updating my CV. It's like the worst thing ever, because whenever I'm applying with something, I always feel like I haven't done enough, and people have to remind me I've done stuff. Because I'm just like, is this enough? I don't know. it's just something, and I feel like that's something that I felt when I was like 18. So I feel like that hesitance, that anxiety, I think that's just a default for everyone. That's what I'm kind of concluding. This is just my existence. But I think when it comes to being part of the queer community, we have an additional anxiety because we're uncomfortable with who we are, because we were told that who we are is problematic. So I think that's another level of hesitation that we have to sort of push through. But I feel as if I take space when I need to. I always try to show up, try to attend events, and I 100% have people around me that I aspire to be, that have done amazing things. People like, you've done this week. I'm like, yeah. But have you seen that person who is like my mentor? They've done like amazing things. Like, because other people have done it, other people have paved the way, like Dr. Ronks. There's so many names that you could, like Charlie Craggs, like Kenny's amazing. Like, there's so many people out there who are just paving the way. So never be afraid to take the step after them or take the first step somewhere else, you know? Yeah, there's a trans workout group, and we get to go to a gym in Bank, and it's mainly suited and booted people. And then there's like a group of trans guys, and I hate going to the change room because I hadn't had top surgery yet. But I'm just like standing by my sports bra on my beard. I'm like, this is very uncomfortable. Like, that was just yesterday. Everyone has their moments where they keep pushing forward. But I would say, yeah, know what you can and can't talk about. Someone contacted me recently asking if someone wanted to speak to a bi activist. I'm like, but I'm not bi, so I can pass on to someone else. Just because you know of someone I used to be bi, it doesn't mean that you can speak from now. So yeah, knowing what you can do and having the confidence to push for it, but also being aware when someone else probably could do a better job purely because they have the characteristics to do it, not because of their CV. Ignore the CV. If you got the opportunity, go for it, because that person thought that you could do it. But yeah, if you didn't have that characteristic, pass it on.
Absolutely. I've just noted from the chat there, Dr. Paul loves looking at CVs. So if anybody ever needs a hand with their CV, Rico, if that ever comes up, Dr. Paul is there for you.
Oh, thank you. My God, I actually miss you, Paul. Amazing.
So, like, I mean, personally, as a member of a community that's being attacked from the media, from the government, even from within, and Rico, I'm sure that you understand this as well, that the trans community needs help and support from allies. But it's not just about us as well. There are others within the community, and we need to be allies for our allies as well. And that's something that can obviously sometimes go overlooked. So what does intra-community allyship look like? What are the things that we need to consider when we look at intra-community allyship? Yas, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is all about like solidarity, isn't it? Like, there's a statement that's often attributed to Marsha P, although I'm not sure if she actually said it, but no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. And of course, like, that's it, right? Like, we can't, especially within the LGBTQ plus community, we can't just start to break that down into silos of identity and decide, okay, we're just gonna, like, this one group will, you know, break things down even into like sexual orientation versus gender identity, because for so many people, those things are very entwined. You cannot separate them. They're so like inherently and intrinsically part of our identity. But even if we wanted to, like, the forces of oppression don't care about the difference. So why are we fighting amongst ourselves and trying to create these differences? It doesn't make sense. So yeah, I guess just remembering that we do have a common goal. And I think across like all marginalized people, ultimately, we are fighting against oppressive systems that are out to get all of us. It doesn't care about, like, there isn't a kind of hierarchy. It doesn't care about any of us, really. So we kind of can only really overcome it or start to maybe imagine something different if we work together in doing that, rather than trying to find like the separation between us. Of course, that still means we do need to recognize things like our own privilege within those systems and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think as Rico said earlier, like, that is a superpower, that is something we can utilize, rather than in a positive way, rather than as a way that kind of like continues to separate us out. So yeah, about recognizing our power and where we do have privilege and can use that to benefit all of us, all people around us, all marginalized and oppressed people. Really listening to one another and hearing each other, like, especially when we're talking about shared experiences or experiences that we might find commonality in. But, you know, if you're just kind of expecting that someone else has a different experience, so they won't understand what yours has been, actually, if you take the time to properly hear each other, we find that there is maybe a lot more like shared experiences that we might have, and that's a really powerful tool. Within that, again, it's kind of just like decentering ourselves sometimes. So that will take, again, it's quite hard work, isn't it? Like, you know, especially when you feel the weight of like oppression, or as a marginalized person or somebody with a marginalized identity, it can be very difficult to decenter yourself. But taking a step back to just, you know, reflect that you aren't the only person who's struggling or suffering, that we all have some of these shared experiences, and how can we kind of lift each other up together, rather than either pushing against each other or pushing ourselves apart. And so as part of that, for me, it is all just about moving from empathy, acknowledging that like we won't understand specifically what everyone else's experiences will have been. That's why it's important to listen to each other, but we can still have perhaps an understanding of, you know, when things have been really difficult or what like microaggressions might feel like. And, you know, if we can reflect on that and draw on that, we can understand that we don't want anybody to feel those things, and how can we start to work together to try and overcome that and try and push back against the forces that are creating those feelings of oppression and that weight on all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, when you were talking, I could think immediately of so many areas of overlaps where we can easily see where we can be supporting each other because we have that common goal to fight against that system of oppression. But for some reason, people don't see that, which is just so frustrating. So, Rico, what do you think intra-community allyship looks like, and what are some of the key considerations?
I think it's along the lines of asking trans and non-binary people, or LGBT community in general size, right? I'm used to being on trans panels, that's why it's trans and non-binary. Being part of the LGBT community, having to fight for your rights on a daily basis does take its toll. It is emotionally exhausting. So an ally coming up to you and saying, what can I do to help? It's like, oh my God, brilliant. Thank you so much. It makes all the difference. So say, for example, Benefits, they're a makeup brand. Not that I'm saying corporations are great, they're not, they have their problems. But instead of having a pride campaign that was purely around, here's one POC person and LGBT people and it's pink and sparkly, they were like, okay, what do you want to talk about? And then I think Kenny did a campaign about trans men have periods. Now that in itself got a lot of pushback, but at its time, considering what the average cishet person thinks, that would be considered quite controversial. So people using their platforms to speak for us is brilliant. I follow a page called Feminist, I think it's Feminist or The Feminist, and they always post things around like trans women or women. It's just, yeah, they don't just fight the corner for cishet women, they fight the corner for all women. And I think that's beautiful in itself. But I would say that the current, sorry to get political on you, the current Equality Office is atrocious. I don't think anyone in this room probably likes Liz Truss. I don't know what she's going to do afterwards. She's not going to struggle to find a job. She can't work at a charity, that's for sure. Yeah, so I think when it comes to women's rights, vice voting against misogyny, not being a form of hate crime, then there's the GRA for trans people, banning conversion therapy, another mess. So, and saying that institutional racism doesn't exist. They're hitting us across every single protective characteristic. So yeah, I think collectively, all charities aren't happy with this office. So if we really wanted to, we could potentially get rid of it or replace it, obviously. I'm not an abolitionist. But yeah, working together and coordination is really, really important. But obviously it does take its toll. So you need people who don't feel the brunt of the discrimination to kind of help out.
Yeah, great point. And it is that working together, isn't it? That kind of coming together in order to face that fight. Tatum, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just to add on to this feeling of collective liberation. And I think it's not making assumptions about people from just seeing something that they post on Instagram. You know, we're all so complex, and each person might show other parts of their identity or share their stories on social media or through their work, but it's like, it's seeing the humanity in each person. And I guess like the infighting thing it's not helpful. And yes, there's always a space to call out someone who's done something wrong, or call in, I should say, and or to educate. But it's, when we look at the greatest movements that have actually made change, it's, you know, like lesbians and gays support the miners, or you had the Black Panthers that were feeding the protesters for the American disability rights movement. They've got different things they're fighting for, but when they came together, that's when change happens. So I just think wherever you have the capacity, don't just go out on the streets and march for the thing that's affecting you. Wherever you can, to stand up for other people and be hand in hand. And I think that's the thing that I've learned so much by just checking with my friends and being like, how can I advocate for you here? And vice versa, because sometimes it's hard doing it all on our own, and we don't have to.
Yeah. What you've just said reminded me of when the Black Lives Matter movement arose to prominence, and that was around Pride Month. And at that time, it was a case of, we recognize that this is happening and it's bigger. It's, we share a similar sort of oppression, but this needs the attention right now. And it's almost like our community stepped aside to allow that to happen. We gave it the support as well. So seeing something like that actually happen is really, really powerful. And that brings us on to resilience, because it's a huge part of who we are. I don't think anyone can say that they choose to be resilient. We just are, we have to be. It's the way that we're shaped because of things that happen to us. Like, we're just there getting on with our lives, and then all of a sudden, bang, something happens. And then we carry on, bang, something else happens. And those events shape us, and we're forced to be resilient. But can we ever be tired of being resilient? I mean, can our community offer us more than just resilience? What can we actually do? Rico, any tips, or do you have any thoughts on resilience?
I'm really big on boundaries. I'm really big on boundaries and energy, because my friends kind of describe me as like a ball of light. I just sort of skip through life. And I feel like if people mess with that, I just can't. I just can't with it. So yeah, I kind of, because I mean, I've had depression and anxiety before. I think most people in the community have. So it's kind of important to recognize what your boundaries are. I only really, it sounds really bad, but I only really can take one piece of bad news per day from someone else. So I have my own plans for the day. I have my own projects to work on. But if I get someone complaining about something like one of their relationships, I probably wouldn't listen to anything else the rest of the day. I'm like, can it wait till tomorrow? Because you can easily get bogged down by other people's problems. But you have to remember, because I'm a giver, I have to remember that, if I'm taking care of everyone else, who's taking care of me? I kind of sort of disappear and just do cooking and gardening. That's just my vibe. But yeah, back to the actual panel itself. Have you ever been tired of resilient? Yeah, so I guess people are a bit like an elastic band. You can be resilient, you can keep going, but eventually, excuse the analogy, but you can snap. You have to make sure that you are in this body for many, many years to come. So your mental health, your self-care is kind of important. And I like to think of communities as being like a symbiotic organism. We're all part of a network of individuals. So if you want to take a break, someone else will take a step forward. You don't have to do everything. It's okay to sort of take a break. I think people kind of forget that, because we're a community, we're not individuals. That's kind of the beautiful thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And with it being Mental Health Awareness Week, it's great seeing posts where people now are actively reaching out and kind of saying, you can lean on me rather than having to fight it on your own, because people do snap, people do get burnt out quite a lot. Tatum, do you think we can ever be tired of being resilient?
Yeah, this question, a few things have come up. First of all, being pansexual, it's interesting because when I'm with a man, other than microaggressions of being pan or bi, I don't have to have the same resilience when I'm accessing the world as when I'm with a woman or a femme presenting person, how people are perceiving my relationship. And so when my even coming out of a relationship with a man and then going back recently into dating a woman at the moment, and like I was like, oh wow, that sense of resilience is like right up again, because I'm having to constantly be aware, like looking around before I kiss, or when I'm checking the tube. And so it's just this sort of like resilience of existing in the world can be really, really tiring. And I kind of just feel like I don't want to feel that, that's one aspect of it. And then I think as well, for many of us, we have always had to be strong and resilient, sort of living in a world that kind of rejects us or isn't safe and isn't accessible. So I'm kind of so tired of people saying, oh, I don't know how you do it, you know, I couldn't do that. And it's like, well, I don't really have a choice, you know, I don't have any other way. I have to. This is my experience. I guess there's an intersection of being queer and disabled, but yeah, a lot of the time that sort of thing of being like, I want someone to hold a space where I don't have to be that. I don't want to be this strong person all the time. So yeah, I think it's like giving each other this space to fall apart is something that I'm looking for, and in spaces like this I feel like I've got that, you know, and it feels good to build that community. So yeah, and I think when it comes to boundaries, because we are so used to being resilient, it's okay to turn around to people who always just be like, oh, but you've got this, or I can ask you this question, or you'll be able to do this job, to just say no. It really is important for us to do that. And what I've learned though, which is one of my toxic traits, was just ignoring messages now or emails. And now I'm like learning how to handle that a bit better and actually just let people know, sorry, I can't get to this. So there's different ways that you can let people know. We don't have to. If you just want to say no, do that. But I'm finding more healthy ways for me to communicate. I don't have the capacity for this, to be resilient right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's what works for you, isn't it? What benefits you and how it helps you to move on or get through certain things. Yas, anything to add to that in terms of being tired and resilient?
Yeah, I mean, I'm tired right now. I'm tired all the time. But like, yeah, I mean, I have grown up with the narrative of being like the strong Black woman. With my siblings, with my friends, it's always been like, yeah, but you can handle anything. And very often it's because I didn't have a choice. Like Tatum was saying, like I had this conversation the other day, actually. People were like, well, some people, this person I was speaking to is like, some people are just stronger than other people and can deal with things more differently. And I was like, I don't know that that's the case. I think some people just have had to, and they didn't have the option. There was nobody there to come and save them. So I think, and so they've learned to be really strong. They've learned to be like, I used to hold on to this idea of resilience and being, you know, the strong Black woman as this sort of pride, almost the sense of like, yeah, I can withstand anything and I can just like find a way to get through it. And like, yeah, I was kind of getting through it, but I was also kind of like slowly dying inside. And it was like, it's, you know, really like has been crushing me my whole life. I'm gonna tell a quick story, and so I'm gonna do a little content warning where there'll be mentions of like depression and like light mention of suicide, but nothing too deep. But you know, when the like Black Lives Matter protests and things were happening a couple of years ago, like in the midst of it all, in the most heated like moments of it, I went into like a really deep depression, and like I literally could hardly get out of bed, apart from doing like essential things, because I was just like, this is the state of the world that we exist in, and nothing we're going to do is going to change it. And it felt completely helpless. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, basically I have to do something. I have to figure out what I'm going to do, because otherwise I'm literally just like never going to get out of this bed. And so that's when I kind of decided to launch my company and kind of make that my driving factor in how I'm going to create change in the world. And I like needed to hit that kind of low point to be able to kind of get up again and, you know, decide this is how I'm going to change things, this is what I'm going to do. But at the same time, there is a sense of resentment that is attached to that, because I was looking around at like my friends, a lot of like my white friends were like very carefree and can, you know, spend their lives doing whatever they want to do. And, you know, they don't have to have this focus on like fighting injustice that I feel is like, you know, essential to my being now. Yeah, gonna be honest, there is a bit of resentment around that, because I feel like I have to do this, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't what anybody would like. Like, I wish we lived in a world where nobody had to do this. You know what I mean? So yeah, where am I going with that? It is draining. It is it's incredibly tiring. But at the same time, like I think being part of this community and finding community. And like for me, in many ways, like I didn't find this really beautiful, great community that like through organizations like We Create Space, through some of the other charities and groups that I found mostly online actually during lockdown. I've been able to really find a strong sense of community and a strong sense that there are other people who are around me, who are nurturing me and who are creating space for me to let go of some of that frustration and to ask for help. And like right now, this year, like last year, I went into really deep burnout because I was trying to fight everything all the time and trying to do everything and say yes to everything. And this year, I'm all about a soft life. No is my best friend. I love saying no to things now. It's great. But you know, I'm really committed to like looking after myself so that when I have to go and, you know, fight or put things, you know, try and create change or try and, you know, make a difference in the world, I am doing that from a place where I'm full and not from where I'm like completely drained and empty. And I've been able to find that in community. And there was a final point I had. Yeah, one of the best things actually to come out of community is this sense of, I guess, remembering what we're fighting for. And there's like so much joy in that. And sometimes it can feel really heavy and can feel really like, you know, the world is against us, the government's against us, the media's against us. But at the end of the day, when we're together and amongst one another, there is so much joy. And being part of the LGBTQ community is one of the greatest gifts that I've ever like experienced. And I'm so grateful to be a queer person and to have met the people I've met and have the experiences that I've had because of that. And so sometimes you just need a little reminder of that like we are part of this amazing community surrounded by incredible people. And it's such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely, yes. We're part of something much, much bigger than we are. And like everybody said so far, you know, we don't really choose this. We kind of have it thrust upon us and we have to be resilient, whether we like it or not. But sometimes we just want to be the little spoon. We don't want to keep being that big spoon all the time. Because it does get really tiring. There's been a lot to process, and we've discussed, you know, quite a lot of heavy things. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I just want to thank Rico, Yaz, Tatum for joining me on this session. I'm going to hand back to Maylis now.
Rico, you had something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the last question was, how do queer leaders inject life back into the fight? And I was going to make a dad joke about testosterone, and you completely skipped that question.
I'm sorry, Rico.
Yes.
Have we got
ruined my punchline? I was sitting here waiting, chuckling for like 15
Rico,
minutes.
land this punchline. One thing we wanted to do is we noticed how live the chat was, and we're so grateful for what you shared, and we're seeing a lot that's coming up. So we thought we'd give people some time in breakouts to chat.
No,
Rico lands the joke.
I completely understand that you're here to run a schedule and not to accommodate for my dad jokes, but no, I was just teasing you. But no, thank you very much for having me.